Well, you've seen the thumbnail and you're either thinking, oh yes, a history of Ruf Automobile, or you're thinking, who the heck are Ruf Automobile? Well, in the next few minutes, I'll take you through the whole history of an amazing company that's been having way too much fun with Porsches for over 60 years. I was fortunate enough to interview the CEO and son of the founder, Alois Ruf, who helped me piece together the whole story. So if my voice makes it to the end of the video, sorry, I'm suffering from a cold, let's enjoy together the Ruf Automobile story. Germany after the Second World War was a country with few opportunities to make money. Alois Ruf had founded a vehicle repair garage in Pfaffenhausen in southern Germany in 1939. After the war, he found there was steady business keeping old vehicles on the road, as Germans had precious little money for anything else.
The real business started after World War II, and he had to work on anything that had wheels. And there was a lot of improvisation because there was very little material available. It was only broken stuff, and out of 10 things, they were trying to improvise, make something that was one thing at the end, and it would work. But having said that, this made him so special because he didn't fear anything. He could put an English motor in a German car or a German motor in an American car or whatever. He would make it always fit.
The company grew and they added a petrol station. By the mid-1950s, Alois had designed a bus that he used to do sightseeing tours on the weekends, seen here with a cheeky Mercedes badge on the front. He was still doing these tours when a pivotal moment happened whilst driving the tour bus.
He was overtaken by a Porsche 356. To be precise, it was a Karmann hardtop car, and the driver of the car lost control after he overtook my father. And he ended up in the ditch and rolled the car twice. My father stopped, looked after him, brought him to the hospital to have him checked out, but no severe injuries, thank God. And ended up buying the damaged car, fixed it, and this was our first Porsche. And we drove this car for almost a year, and then something very unexpected happened. We were driving the car through Munich on a Sunday afternoon, and a young man knocks at the window and asks us to stop. And the young man was a student who was also dealing in Porsches or brokering Porsches. And that was very unusual. You must not forget the brand Porsche was only 15 years young at that time. And the Porsche was a very rare vehicle and very rarely seen because very few cars were out there. It was really a connoisseur situation. And the young man talked to us, and we ended up selling him the car unexpectedly for 11,500 Deutschmarks, which was a lot of money at that time.
His son, also called Alois, grew up living and breathing cars. The Porsche incident had a profound effect. Like any self-respecting teenage petrolhead, he encouraged his father to get into Porsche repair.
You can imagine how well I could influence my father and encourage him to do another one like that, you know. And so this is what we did. We got to the next Porsche, and then we built up a reputation slowly but surely as a Porsche specialist who can repair and fix and maintain Porsche cars. Because at that time, that didn't exist. The only people who worked on Porsches were the big Volkswagen dealers, because they had one corner in the shop where they said, oh, this is where we have our Porsche mechanic, and he works on Porsche cars.
Germans had money in their pockets, so as Porsche's sales grew, so did the fortunes of Alois Ruf's business. But the company's fortunes took a hit in the mid-1970s. First was the oil crisis. It seemed the age of sports cars were dead, with the price of petrol quadrupling. This was compounded with the tragic death of Alois Ruf at the age of 62. The younger Alois, only 24, was now head of his father's business. With the oil shock fading, he decided to go all in on the Porsche side of the business, the area he knew and loved. And almost immediately, Porsche delivered what Alois believed was a golden opportunity.
And then something happened in the Porsche world where Porsche believed that the 911 Porsche has no future. And they said, we will stop the production in 1980, maybe 1981, the last year. And then it will be finished with the 911. And everybody will have a rational car, which would have been the 928, which is a much better car. It has heating and it has engine in the front. It has better road holding and all kinds of arguments. And Porsche themselves talked themselves out of the 911.
Ruf's Porsche customers were telling them exactly the opposite. They wanted a stripped back, faster, better handling 911. With Ruf only needing to produce a handful of cars to break even, there was very little downside, so they released the Ruf Turbo in 1977. Based on the 1973 930 version of the 911, with so many modifications it was considered a new vehicle. The 3.3-litre 303 horsepower turbocharged engine would have been pretty special if Porsche hadn't released their own uprated version the same year. Ruf's version had a great deal of creature comforts though: leather stitched Recaro seats, a stereo cassette radio with 4 speakers, electric windows, central locking and climate control. Even the roof liner was handmade from perforated leather. Sound deadening could have been better. It was louder than the standard 911, especially with a modified silencer. But then, wasn't the engine's soundtrack part of the reason for buying this car? One thing I've learnt over time is that one of the secrets to business success is to be the biggest fanatic of the product that you're customizing. Ruf's obsession with the Porsche 911 was their recipe for success. They were the ultimate fans who wanted ultimate performance, and their decades of automotive experience allowed them to make a truly special car. There was a larger rear wing, more cooling up front, and twin tailpipes to get the exhaust fumes out faster. They turned the 4-speed into a 5-speed, and the engine was disassembled and then rebuilt with different pistons and cylinders. The suspension could be in standard or rally mode. The brakes were of course uprated, but at least one review said that they needed more stopping power. After all, this was a pure driver's car designed by those who love to drive. But not everyone who bought one knew how to control all of that power, and it was easy to get into trouble. The Ruf Turbo wasn't cheap, but then did you expect a custom Porsche 911 to be a steal? In 2025, the price would be £123,000, about the same as today's stock Porsche 911 Carrera Cabriolet, which goes to show just how much Porsches have gone up in price over time. Now, every company needs a second act, and Ruf's followed in 1978, the SCR that slotted in between Porsche's low and high-end models. It wasn't as powerful as the Ruf Turbo, but with a 0-60 of 5.7 seconds, it still put a smile on your face. Porsche, the car company, had concerns that owners of Ruf modified cars would hold Porsche liable when they wrapped one around a tree. So after negotiations between the two companies, it was decided that Ruf would set themselves up as a manufacturer in their own right. By 1983, there was the Ruf BTR, the letters meaning Group B Turbo Ruf. There was more tuning that led to more power, 369 horsepower, and it kept the company's cars in demand. You could get a new BTR directly from Ruf. They would buy the cars from Porsche, or you could send your 911 in to be modified to match the BTR spec. Ruf's orders book got a boost in 1984 when it won World's Fastest Car, an event held by American car magazine Road and Track. It obliterated the competition that included the Lamborghini Countach, Ferrari BB5112, and yes, Porsche's own 911. As Ruf was a vehicle manufacturer, it also became the first production car to go over 300 kilometers per hour. Even though many Americans didn't quite see eye to eye with metric units, it got the attention of a lot of very wealthy people across the pond. It would motivate Ferrari to create the 288 GTO specifically to beat Minno's Ruf and their giant-killing BTR. Ruf responded to this in 1987 with the CTR, now based on the 911 Carrera 3.2 due to its lower curb weight and drag. Ruf's expertise in engineering a fast and light car were improving, with the company shaving another 200 kilos off the already light car with tricks including aluminium bodywork. The 3.4-litre engine from the Porsche 962 Group C sports car produced 463 horsepower. That combination of power, weight and aerodynamics to slip through the air and hold it down to the road made for a potent combination. But would it best the cars that had caught up, like Ferrari's GTO? Road and Track readers got to find out in 1987 when the magazine staged another world's fastest car shootout. The fact that Porsche's entry, the 959, already beat the old 186 mile an hour, 300 km per hour time from 1984 showed that the competition had moved on. In the test, a Koenig-tuned Porsche made it over 200 miles an hour. Then Ruf's new CTR graced the track in bright yellow.
We had a very bright color car, and the photographers at that time wanted to have cars with good bright colors so they could make a good photo. There was no Photoshop at that time. Everything had to be done with the film, and the film had to be a good picture from the first shot and not photoshopping afterwards. Mm-hmm. So we had the only car with a strong color. There was a Ferrari also in red, which was good, but all the other cars were in dark colors and the weather was terrible. It was a black sky, and the only car that was so shiny was this yellow car.
The only yellow car there, the Road and Track team nicknamed it the Yellowbird. Could it beat the 200 mile an hour time set by the Koenig Porsche? Well, it barreled down the track, and I'll let Road and Track explain just what happened. We pulled into the pits and Alois Ruf asked how fast we'd gone. When we told him 209 miles an hour, applause broke out in the crowd around the car. The teenage son of one of the Ferrari owners looked through the window at our instrument panel and exclaimed, "Mit radio!" Everyone laughed, but those two words summed up the real-world versatility of the car. Later, the car went even faster, 211 miles an hour. Once again, Ruf had bested all comers with a car that wasn't just fast, but handled well, and yes, it had a radio. If you have the fastest production car in the world and you're German, then there's only one next step: to do a lap around the Nürburgring. The video, which is going on behind me, dubbed Fascination on the Nürburgring, became popular in the days before viral videos, with friends passing copies around on VHS tape. It showed the speed capable of cars in 1987, and with all the sideways movement through the corners, showed just how much fun the CTR was to drive. Porsche by now had woken up to the fact that their loyal fans loved the 911, but there were still enough people who loved the special editions that Ruf were crafting. Early 1990s cars were based on the 964. Ruf's 1993 successor to the BTR, the logically titled BTR2, would be based on the newer 993. To show just how close Porsche and Ruf were working, that car appeared before the 993 hit dealerships. Other supercar manufacturers hadn't taken kindly to being whooped not once but twice in the 1980s, so the 1990s was a time of increased competition. The Jaguar XJ220 claimed the fastest production car mantle, followed shortly by the McLaren F1. Ruf in the 1990s couldn't compete with the budgets of larger car companies, but their cars were still rapid. The CTR2 was just as fast as the original Yellowbird at 211 miles an hour, and being based on the newer 911 platform, it was safer. Headline speeds bring in customers, but a great performance car is all about sheer driving pleasure, something Ruf knew all too well. The original Ruf Turbo got an update as the Turbo R in 1998, again based on the 993 and designed to replace the CTR2, but production only lasted a single year. Ruf turned their hand to the open-top Porsche Boxster with the 3400S in 1999 and the 3600S 3 years later. Work continued improving the 911 with the RGT and the R Turbo, not to be confused with the Turbo R. In the mid-2000s, Porsche updated the Boxster and it got a roof as the Cayman. There was enough demand from the first generation car for Ruf to offer performance versions of both cars, the RK Spider and the RK Coupe. The R Compressor, RGT, and the RT12 launched based on the new 997. Like the previous cars, the RT12's engine was bored out, and by swapping out the turbochargers, the engine's power went from 523 horsepower to 676. It also used custom body panels to increase downforce. Ruf's cars were moving away from being lightly tuned Porsches to becoming a completely different car. It continued with the CTR3, the first car Ruf created from scratch. Its shape was designed by Bennett Soderberg and his father, ex-Porsche stylist Richard Soderberg.
He came up with a beautiful shape of that CTR3. That was happening together with Freeman Thomas. That was a fantastic feeling when you look at a car that, this is our own bespoke shape, and people love it. And that was fantastic.
As Alois mentioned, Freeman Thomas helped on the shape, the stylist behind the original Audi TT. Underneath there was a custom Ruf chassis with mechanical parts taken from both the 911 and the Cayman and other third-party suppliers. The 691 horsepower engine got the car to 60 in 3.2 seconds and on to an estimated 233 miles an hour. This was the new ultimate Ruf sports car. It's something that they've continued to develop with the CTR3 Evo unveiled in 2023, producing a massive 789 horsepower. Tesla's Roadster wasn't the only fast EV in 2008. Ruf created an EV prototype, the eRuf Model A. It was way too expensive to produce their own powertrain, so they lent on the work of UQM Technologies, a company that had been refining electric motors and generators since the 1960s. They'd produced the Electrek in 1982, which didn't go anywhere fast, but by the 2000s they developed a practical drivetrain. The one used for the eRuf had the equivalent of 201 horsepower that gave this modified 911 a top speed of 140 miles an hour. Ruf had hopes for production, but customers weren't keen and it remained a concept. Since then, Ruf has steered well clear of electrification. Over at Porsche, the historic sports car maker was expanding into new areas. We got the 2002 Cayenne crossover SUV, and with clear public demand, Ruf threw their cap into the ring with their own version, the Dakara. There was a body kit to set it apart from the standard Cayenne, but paradoxically, although the tuned engine had a little bit more power, it was slower to 60 than a stock Cayenne. Demand for the car can't have been great, as it was only offered for 1 year before being dropped. No, what customers wanted from Ruf were 911s tuned within an inch of their life, and since the EV and Dakara experiments, this is exactly what Ruf has produced, to the delight of their customers. Today you could get the updated CTR looking all the world like the original 1980s Porsche 911 based Yellowbird. But this 1980s throwback has 2020s technology with a carbon fiber body over a custom chassis. For the right price, you can have the fantasy car of your youth, and with 700 horsepower, it'll live up to those memories on the track. The SCR is a very similar car, a recreation of the 1978 original, but again with a custom chassis and body and gobs of power. Then there's the CTR3 Evo I've already mentioned, and Ruf will still take your favorite 911 and work their magic. There's also their brand new car, the Rodeo, a Ruf sports car designed to be taken on uneven surfaces at a rapid pace. All-wheel drive and chunky tyres provide the grip, and the custom engine provides more than enough power.
We as a small company, we have to manage that we get United States approval, which is not easy. The European approval is even harder now than the US. It's as far as safety regulations, as far as emissions regulations, but we manage, we get it all done. And that is a very, very big challenge also for a small company like us. But we are always our own entity, and we love Porsche, and we are very close to the Porsche product that they're doing. And that has been also our success, that people who buy our cars, they also have a Porsche. We are not hurting Porsche because they have at least 2 or 3 Porsches besides our car. So it's just another enhancement in their collection of cars. And that's the beauty of it. And one thing I also wanted to mention here, we do very serious restoration and also resto mods. So that is happening here as well. And that has been happening for a long, long time. I mean, we are restoring early Porsches, 1950s, 356s, or sometimes a 550 Spider or a 904. Such cars also land in our company.
It's apt that the word Ruf in German translates to reputation. It's something that the company has cultivated over 86 years and counting. Only 29 CTR Yellowbirds were ever made, but 80 million people have bought Gran Turismo for the PlayStation, where the virtual car can be yours to drive whenever you like. In an age where car platforms and transmissions are used across a myriad of cars, it's nice to see that it's still possible to get cars that are hand-built with custom parts. Ruf Automobile continues to stay true to its vision of making fun and exciting cars, and long may that continue. If you want to listen to the whole Ruf interview, there's a link on the right. Thanks for watching, and hopefully when I've got my voice back, I'll see you in the next video.